a year to $98,600 a year. By accident, the highest income in the file gets changed to $986,000. Nice. Does this affect the average? Well, yes, of course it does. Because if we add a big outlier into the group, then the average is going to be pulled in the direction of the outlier or of the skew. So now when we have this one point way out here, we've got this one that's way higher than the rest. So our distribution will be skewed and will affect the average. Yes, by how much? Well, we can find that by figuring out the difference of how much did this score go up by. So how much? We can just take and then subtract the original score and their difference. Oh, and then divide by 1,000 because that's the number of participants. We're dividing by 1,000 because we have 1,000 up here. It's n. Remember, we divide by n quite frequently. And so this whole thing together is going to be $887.40. Does this change affect the median? No, it doesn't, because the median is not thrown off by outliers. And the reason the median is not affected by outliers is that it doesn't matter if that highest score is 900, if that highest score goes up or not. Each score just counts for one. It just counts as its own frequency. So the median is the score is still going to be the point at which 50% are below. 50% of the scores are below that point. 50% of the scores are going to be below the same point, whether that, and it doesn't matter if you change the highest point. Or if you change the lowest. Now we have an incoming test, or we have incoming students at a certain law school that have an average LSAT score of 163 and a standard deviation of 8. We're going to use that information later, and we often use numbers later. So again, it's nice to highlight them when you're reading through. Tomorrow, one of these students will be picked at random. They're going to pick a random LSAT student. You have to guess the score now. This is a weird scenario. The guess will be compared with the actual score to see how far off it is. Each point off will cost $1. I don't know what kind of bet this is. So for example, if the guess is 158 and the score is really 151, you'll have to pay $7. So should you guess 150, 163, or 170? Well, you should certainly guess 163. That's the average score, and we would expect that it will be the most common score too. So we should guess the most common score. And then you have a 1 in 20 chance to lose more than $1, $8, or $20. Well, which one of these is it? Probably, well, we have a standard deviation of 8. So because the standard deviation of 8 and the standard deviation is the and one standard deviation above and below the mean is equal to about 68%. 68% is about a 1 in 3 chance to lose. So you have a 1 in 3 chance. That's because 2/3, right? 2 out of 3 is 66%. If within 1 standard deviation above and below, we have 68%, that's quite close to 66%. And that's where they're getting this idea. So they're saying there's only a 1/3 chance that the score is going to be outside of 1 standard deviation above and below the mean. And that 1 standard deviation is $8. Okay. Almost done. And we are burning through these, less than a half an hour, and we'll have them, I mean, not half an hour from now, half an hour total. So now as in exercise 10, but a whole series of students are chosen. And that is a whole series of LSAT students. The RMS size of your losses should be around $8. Why $8 again? Because $8 is the standard deviation, and the standard deviation is the RMS deviation from average. That's all. And finally, last but not least, many observers think that there's a permanent underclass in American society. Most of those in poverty, typically remain poor from year to year. Over the period of 1970 to 2000, the percentage of the American population in poverty each year has been remarkably stable at 12% or so. Income figures for each year were taken from the March current population survey of that year. The cutoff for poverty was based on official government definitions. To what extent do these data support the theory of the permanent underclass? So there's a couple of ways to think about this. The data, for one, are cross-sectional, and we didn't talk about experimental design much today. Don't worry about that. We're going to revisit the various experimental designs. But in a cross-sectional survey, which was introduced in the chapter, we are not following the same subjects year to year. We're looking at different participants at each time point. And so we would have a better argument for permanent underclass if we had longitudinal data where we were able to follow the same subjects from time point to time point and to verify that those people stayed in poverty across time. Some data shows, longitudinal data, tends to show that most spells of poverty, or at least extreme poverty, are relatively short. So we see some movement of people from the in and out of the impoverished underclass, but there is weak to moderate support here for this idea that there's a permanent underclass. So there is a permanent underclass. We need more information about the longitudinal trajectory or the longitudinal path of participants' individual poverty experiences in order to really have a stronger case for this theory of the permanent underclass. We can't prove the theory of the permanent underclass based on these data because these are observational data. And with observational data, we can only make observations about trends. If we want to look at causal issues, we must do an experiment. There you have it. That's all of our review exercises. I hope that you found it helpful to go through them like this. As you could see, I tried to illustrate some of the ways of how you can approach each problem and think about it. And when you're doing so, like we did today, try to move through them at as rapid pace you can while still putting forth an honest intellectual effort to understand each problem and each item. And in tomorrow's session, there'll be a review of Chapter 5. And we'll do a similar process. I'll go through the key points that you need to know from Chapter 5, and then we'll do the exercises. Come here. Do you have any other questions about these? About these problems? Good. We're going to continue to do as many review exercises as we can. I'm trying to, ideally, I'd like to get through all of the review exercises in lecture for each chapter. Some weeks we might not have time, but I'm really making it a priority. So let that be another thing to help ease your anxiety. You're absolutely not on your own out there. I'm doing these with you too. And we will get through them together.